Representative O'Hearn, did you have a privilege of the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege.
Please.
There's a young gentleman, and I say young because he's almost the same age as I am. Brett Baugh and I went to #1 school together in Wyoming, NCHS and Casper. But I didn't really get to know him until I came back from Army basic training when he asked me what I was going to run the 2 miles in for our PT test. We both agreed that the mid 15 or 16-minute mark would be a good pace for both of us. Brett and I became friends after that, and I served with him for the full 20 years he was in the Army National Guard in one unit or another throughout the state. After serving in the Army, he helped open the state AARP office in Wyoming, serving our statewide adult population. Brett is retiring from AARP tomorrow after 21 years of service. If any of you have been to an AARP legislative reception, luncheon, or dinner, he was the one that scheduled and organized every detail. I also served with his wife, Gail, who is also in the Guard with us. Brett, his wife, Gail, and their daughter, Bridget, are here today. Please help me in thanking Brett for his many years of service to the older adults all over the state of Wyoming. Hey! Stand up, Bridget.
Welcome to the House, and thank you for all you've done for all that time. Anybody else have a privilege? Not, the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 101.
Senate File 101, sponsored by Senator Ide. Wyoming Legal Tender Act amendments, an act relating to the Wyoming Legal Tender Act being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have an amendment, Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do move number 1 to Senate File 101 and ask for your favorable consideration.
So that'd be third reading amendment.
Third reading amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So members, I bring this amendment hopefully to find that sweet spot that we'll all be comfortable with. I noticed that as we came in on the 2 floors down, they had finished installing some vaults, and there'll be plenty of room for lots of gold, even if it's just 1 coin. Okay, members, are we still awake? They finished the vault downstairs, and we're ready for this bill. So today's amendments would bring back some of the things that the House Standing Committee amendment did. On page 1, we're affecting 1 through 8. And on page 2, we're taking that word shall again. I'm going to go after that one more time because I want the stability in with the businesses and with our department that handles this. I think that's important. If you've got your bill on page 3, we just reinsert a sentence there on line 8, that the holding of specie in legal tender. It's one of the things that makes this bill good. It gives the opportunity. It does not mean that we have a prescribed amount. It could be literally 1 ounce. It could be, we were talking about the other day, the dome of this very building took several ounces. We could actually just buy those ounces and let them set back there and save ourselves some money the next time we decide to gild the dome again. So then on page 4, the only other thing that it does is it moves that date back to 24, just reinstates. So that's the 3 things that this amendment does. The good bringer of the amendment the other day talked about how this was in good shape. And from talking with some of the people in the industry and the business side of that, I think that these are important things to put back in. It does not allow, we're leaving out the part of paying for mineral taxes with pork bellies. We're not putting that back in. I'm sorry to the good representative that suggested that. So this would just put in, we're leaving that part out of it. And so, like I said, I'd ask for your favorable consideration. There's, like I said, we're only touching 3 parts of that. So,
Representative Bear for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment and the bill, I just want to reiterate something I said before, and that is, what is it that the central banks are doing? This is allowing the state to emulate what they're doing, and that is collecting gold. Why are the central banks collecting gold? We really need to ask ourselves this question. And here's how I would, an analogy I would use to help us all understand this. How many of you have a spare tire on your vehicle? How many of you have ever been driving around, had a flat, and realized you didn't have a spare tire on your vehicle? That's a horrible position to be in. It's a horrible, I've done it too. I've been there, and I hated it. So why do people purchase gold? It is to hedge against inflation. It is to not get caught without a spare tire. It's truly a spare tire. Again, I mentioned that this bill does not require that department, number 3 of our state, collect a certain amount of precious metals. It only requires that he have some. So let's get that spare tire. Let's be safe. Let's be smart about how we do our investments, and let's keep that one opportunity to fight against inflation. We'll leave it up to the number 3 elected to determine how much is necessary, how much is the threat. Do we need to have a donut spare, or do we need to have a full-size spare? Do we need to have one with a steel rim or one with an aluminum rim? It'll be up to him to choose that. So on and for the amendment.
Representative Locke for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. Again, I think this just brings back brings the bill back to where it gives us the opportunity to move down this path gracefully. As was already said, inflation has been accelerating, or deflation of the dollar as it may seem. And this would just give the state, an opportunity to remain. It basically exposes us as the dollar continues to, as we continue to see inflation. And this just gives us an opportunity to move forward in this direction of having looking into precious metals and how best to deal with them. And then, as was already mentioned, holding gold is a hedge against this inflation and potential financial turmoil. And passing this amendment, again, just gets us moving down the path of understanding what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. We could do it slowly, gracefully, and logical. On and for the amendment, I think it firms up the bill to allow us to take some initial steps. Thank you.
Representative Ward for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm on and for this amendment. This amendment is very important, and for that reason, I ask that in accordance with Rule 12.4, there's a recorded vote on this amendment.
Do we have a couple seconds on that? Stivar Jennings. Chairman Zwanitzer for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question, because I keep hearing this is to hedge against inflation. Inflation was roughly 6.3 to 6.5% right now. You take our funds, that's $1.7 billion in gold. If that's what we want to do, that's great, I suppose. I'm not sure I want to do that. But if you keep saying this is to hedge against inflation, I don't foresee Wyoming sitting around with $1.7 billion in gold and or silver. So if someone could address if that is actually responsible or legitimate when we're talking about this being a hedge for inflation.
Chairman Nicholas for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, on and against the amendment. So I think we need to take a step back and think about what this body is doing. This body is on its own, without any really professional qualifications as how to invest money over the long term and where to invest money. and telling the state of Wyoming, you're going to invest in gold because we, the legislature, want you to do it. Not because it's the right thing to do, not because the smartest investment folks in the world say, this is how you do it and this is why. We're not doing that. And so basically, we as lay people are saying we want to own gold for the state of Wyoming. And I would respectfully submit that if that is a legitimate thing to do, then what we should do is retain the proper investment advisors and walk down that path so we all understand the pros and cons of doing this, what the long-term costs are, the short-term costs, and have a full understanding of if and whether or not it is a good investment. We are not investors, ladies and gentlemen, we're legislators. And so for us then to take the role and say, by golly, we want to buy gold, and Mr. Treasurer, you shall do it, I just think that that's a step too far. That's not being the proper fiduciary for our dollars. And it really shouldn't be our job. So on and against.
Representative Walters, would you come get in the chair? Representative Jennings for your first time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to speak to that as to what we're actually doing. We are not, I understand the gold is a hedge, and many people look at that as that being a generalized statement. What we're saying here, for me, this is more
Point of order.
about.
Is nobody else going to be able to go, Mr. Chairman? This would be his second time on the amendment.
Chairman
I brought
Brown.
the amendment, sir. I was surprised myself. Would you rather I'd wait, sir?
Chairman Brown. Representative Jennings will just put you on pause. Sorry for the confusion, sir.
Okay, thank you,
Chairman
Mr.
Brown,
Chairman.
please proceed.
And I was confused too, so thank you. I just did quick math. Is the original the bringer of this amendment said, we have a couple of safes downstairs that we could potentially do this, and just looking at the numbers that we were just coming up with, this is roughly 28 tons of gold, about 60,000 pounds worth of gold that we're going to hedge against inflation with. And I don't know if we actually have that amount of room in our safes downstairs. I'll maybe do some looking and see what the average size of these bars is and volume-wise, and find out, maybe we can get our facility staff to find out what the volume is and how much room we're going to take up downstairs. But I don't think Wyoming wants to end up looking like Fort Knox. Thanks.
Representative Haraldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a couple things. First off, I want to push back on the last statement. Nowhere in this bill does it actually state that we have to do that. This is giving the doorway to do that, saying there has to be an investment of some sort. This is giving a doorway to where we can diversify. It's interesting. The first thing I learned whenever I was a 20-some-odd-year-old kid, got my first job that actually paid something, and I marched into an investment office to have a conversation about my future, and they said, Jeremy, the investment, the idea, the best way to think about investments is diversifying your portfolio. That way, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You know what? I would hope and pray that we don't see an economic disaster in this nation, but you guys need to realize history repeats itself. And I guarantee you that before the Great Depression in this nation's past, if there would have been a conversation about a physical asset like this, I think that probably at that point that would have been viewed as wisdom in hindsight. Just something that I think also we need to keep in mind, in 1930, gold was 20 cents an ounce. In 1932, actually, it was $20.62 per ounce, $20.62 per ounce. Now, obviously, we can sit here and go, well, that was a long time ago. Yeah, well, let's just take a $20 bill in 1932 and a $20 bill today. Now, let's take 1 ounce of gold in 1932 and 1 ounce of gold today. I understand that I don't probably have everything figured out in this whole investment world, but I'd much prefer an ounce of gold today than a $20 bill. So there is a point where I don't think anyone can say this is a foolish decision. I do believe that we are at a point where this is a diversifying portfolio concept. And we have to start asking the question, do we dump everything into it? No. Do we get 28 tons of gold? I don't know. That's a decision for another department. But what we are saying is we're giving the ability and making a statement as the legislature, a policy decision again, hey, you know what? We want to diversify our portfolio a little bit, and let's do it in something that's been around since the beginning of time and has always held value long before this nation even was in existence. So on and for the amendment would ask you to consider this. I believe this is an opportunity for us to just make a wise decision for a diversification of a portfolio.
Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. On and against the amendment and against the bill. I really don't understand why we would even contemplate going down this path. There's no value in it. Our investment team can invest in gold shares, gold now, if they think it's a wise choice, or silver shares, or whatever. Now, maybe they can't hold gold, or we can't hold the material, but, I think this is apocalypse thinking. Is the apocalypse on us and we're going to need gold to trade and barter in some future day when the world has ended? I mean, I just don't get it. This is not sound fiscal investment policy. And so I'm on and against the amendment and against the bill.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I'm just missing something here, but I think the intent of this bill is to allow me to pay the state of Wyoming with an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver, and that the state of Wyoming would be able to receive it and then do on my debt. I don't see anything in the bill that says we're going to invest our portfolio in gold. Am I missing something? If somebody can really explain that. Thank you.
Representative Harshman, for your first time.
Yeah, quickly, Mr. Speaker, I'll just a couple things I heard. I wasn't going to talk on this, but I think this amendment does not bring back the paying taxes piece that the good representative from Bags just asked about. So there's none of that paying your taxes in the bill, and this amendment doesn't bring it back. Okay, so we eliminate that with the standing committee amendment. But I think as far as opening the door, and it doesn't tell the treasurer that he has to do anything, I think that's the second part of this amendment on line 4 of the amendment. That changes the may to a shall. So we usually don't do that. And I think we got to be careful trying to think about the finish line if you want this bill to get to the finish line. And when you do those shall things, I think we got to be really careful. So on and against. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time? Representative Bear for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just want to address a couple of things. The good chair of Health and Labor mentioned 28 tons of gold. That is exactly the opposite of what this bill is doing. It is not demanding any particular amount. And in fact, back to my analogy of a spare tire, the 28 tons of gold would be like buying a spare car, so that if you had a flat tire, you had a way of dealing with that. So we're not going to go there. It does not specify any particular amount that the number 3 department would have to purchase. They'd have to purchase some to satisfy it. It could be one coin. Storage was brought up, and I think this is an excellent point, because during the second reading debate, it was often said, this is going to require that we spend some money, things like guards and video surveillance and things like that. This bill allows that department to begin looking into what would the structure be if we ever went down this path. And the good speaker is right. We're not in an apocalypse position or situation, thank goodness. We don't know if we ever will be, but it's prudent to prepare. And again, the hedging is about just like that spare tire, it gives you the ability, if you have a disaster, to do something about it. So when we do build an infrastructure to allow us to deal with precious metals, one of the things that this bill does is it allows that department to contract with outside services. And now there are 3 different depositories within the state of Wyoming that work independently of the state that this department could begin to work with and see what are the possibilities. Without this bill, there's no impetus for them to do it. Without this amendment, there's no impetus for them to go out and figure out what would be necessary should we want to do this. The way the bill sits right now, I'm a no on the bill if we can't get this amendment because it does absolutely nothing. And I think it's really unfortunate that we would go through all this effort. During this session, we've had many people discuss how many thousands of dollars get put into a bill that's a committee bill. Now, this is not a committee bill, this is an individual bill, but we've already spent a lot of dollars, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of intelligence on getting this bill to this point. So if we can't get it back to where it's doing something, where we're making a statement to the executive branch that this is what we want you to do, then it really has been a waste of time. So on and for the amendment and on and for the bill.
Representative Ward for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment, on and for the bill. You don't have to be an investor to know that it's a good idea to buy gold. It gives freedom to the expert investors to decide how much to hold. Please vote aye.
Anybody else for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Jennings I guess I gave you 3 tries because I didn't even remember you brought the amendment the first
I
time.
was holding my breath, Mr. Speaker. I knew I was on pause.
Thank you, Representative Jennings.
So members, I want you to focus on a little bit different here, a little bit different take of it. These things that have been talked about, that's accurate. But I see this as economic development as one of the things that occurs here. In the center of our state is, and I don't know how many of you hold the backs that are gold, but they're little small things that can be used in some states for species, for trading for goods or things of that nature. Mostly they're a novelty to some degree, but they're also a hedge if somebody wants to buy them. And in the center of our state, there's companies that want to come and do that very thing. And we always want to encourage economic development, and we want to bring jobs to this state. I understand, and to the good representative from this city, I was kind of joking about the vaults when I started. You guys were all still taking a nap. That was just kind of a joke. Although we could probably put 1 coin down there and we probably could protect that pretty easily. And so this is more about the idea of freedom. And if we're going to encourage people to come and print these things that are now being more and more popular, there are 7 other states that are currently going over this same type of thing right now. And there's a number of states that are already holding about $1 billion worth of gold. Now, that's kind of amazing. Now, I'm not encouraging that. This bill is not saying that. Literally, less gold than it took to put on our dome up above us. They could hold a half of a coin or a half of a dollar, a half an ounce. We're not specifying any of this. So all the things that the good chairman of appropriations was saying, that is exactly what we're saying here is that those people are investment people. If there comes a time where we think we want to hold physical gold or silver, this would allow that. We're not specifying that they have to hold any amount. They have to hold a little bit, so I guess they have to hold a dime, one of the old 1/10 of an ounce. But this is more about the idea of jobs. This is more about the idea that if we're going to bring, we'll call it a mint, to this state, and we're going to hire people to work there, that we as a body should have a little bit of buy-in that we're actually kind of for that notion also. And that's all that I see this bill is doing. It's not requiring 2,800 pounds of gold. I mean, I think that'd be an interesting idea. I don't know. I don't know if we could fit that, like I said. But this is more about the idea that we're going to back an industry wanting to come to Wyoming. You can go to the state to our west and southwest and several states back east, and they're already printing these things. And so it's not like it's something brand new, and this just helps our department head that way. So it's more of an economic driver, and so with that, I'd ask for your aye vote.
The question is, shall third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 101 be adopted by the House? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellerman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron, excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
No.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 27 aye, 34 no, 1 excused.
Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 101 has failed. The next amendment, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 101 and ask for your favorable consideration. And what this does is, in the event that we are going to have this physical gold, it creates an appropriation to build the facility, the depository, and it provides for a location. And I chose the geographic center of the state of Wyoming because geologically speaking, it's very stable within the state of Wyoming. Furthermore, obviously being the center of the state, it's the farthest from all of our borders. And that way, none of our neighboring states can come in and try to get our physical gold, because we do not want them taking our physical gold from the state of Wyoming. It's ours, it's hard earned. We want to keep it. And so there's a $2 million appropriation in this to build a Class 3 UL certified depository to hold this physical gold. You know, it was discussed in the previous amendment that down here in our basement, we have some beautiful old historic safes, but I just don't believe that the safe that was built in the late 1800s, early 1900s is adequate to meet the needs of today. I think today's criminals are probably smart enough to get into those safes. Plus, physically, we'd heard it discussed that this amount of gold might be as much as 28,000 tons, I believe it was, almost 60,000 pounds. That's going to take a lot more space than we have in those safes down in our basement. Furthermore, I don't even know if our basement floor can support that kind of weight. So all this amendment does is it makes sure that we have a place to house this. And I think it's a wise use of our dollars, as opposed to paying a third party to take care of this for the state of Wyoming, which costs the state of Wyoming. We have a one-time expenditure. We build the facility, and with the facility built, then we're no longer paying a third party to take care of this this physical aspect. And so, again, on and for the amendment. I think it's a good, safe location, being at the geographic center of the state. Geologically speaking, as I said, it's a very stable area, and would ask for your favorable consideration, and thank you.
Representative Bear for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, folks, it is a fact that the northeast corner of the state has more guns per capita than anywhere else. It is completely defensible, and I do believe that such a building would need to be underground, and we have big holes in the northeast corner of the state to build such a thing. And I do believe I could be for the amendment if the location was more open, and the price really needs to be double what it is. I could support about a $4 million appropriation for this. So on and against the amendment, and hopefully we can come up with something a little more flexible.
Representative Brown for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just curious, to the bringer of the amendment, what the traffic to this area. I figured this has probably got, some level of attraction to come to the geographic center of the state, especially from those doing geocaching or anything like that. So I worry about the amount of traffic that might be coming in here. And if we could get some understanding of, being out there in the center of Wyoming is kind of no man's land, but I am a little concerned that there might actually be some unintended consequences going in this area, such as the good representative from the northeast part of the state mentioning little to no population out there, and who's going to protect it? Are we going to end up having to staff an area up there to make sure that we take care of this gold well that's buried up there in the hills?
Representative Davis, let's have you give this a try.
Mr. Speaker, the good bringer of the amendment, I think, needs to look back into history a little bit. The best spot for this is down in my country, the hole in the wall. There's still gold down there that is hid. So it didn't cost very much then to put it in there. But anyway, on and against the amendment.
Representative Wiley for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Body, I would just like to say Fort Sweetwater has a good ring to it. On and against.
Representative Oakley for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess not, Your Honor. I just want it to be very clear that the geographic center of the state is indeed in Fremont County. So I can get on board with putting it in the geographic center of the state. And interestingly, the actual geographic center that's very close is near Hell's Half Acre. So I think that's perhaps where we should be looking.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think the good bringer of the amendment really is doing this without some rationale. One of the interesting things about this portion of the state and the existing industry that's there is there's already a visual and electronic surveillance because of one of the gas plants that has a high amount of H2S that can shut down any road, dirt, state, or county if there's a need to do so. So to protect the state's asset, part of the security required for such a thing is already in place. I think it's a wise thing and support the amendment.
Representative Hornock for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think there's been a misreading of the bill. The word is specie, not specious.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Walters for your second time.
Mr. Speaker, again, on and for the amendment. As I said, geologically speaking, very stable area of the state, being the geographic center. Long ways from our borders, so our neighboring states, when they start to need a little extra in their pockets, it's going to be a lot harder for them to get out into our state to get to this. So it'll be well protected. I think the good representative from up in the other part of the center of the state describes well how this is already a protected area due to the natural resources that are being extracted in that area. And folks, if we're going to have physical gold, we've got to have a place to keep it. So here's a great way to do it. And I think just as the number of folks that came to these microphones and said it should be located in my community for X, Y, or Z reason, locating it in a place where there is nobody essentially keeps that fight from becoming political. This way, it is very non-political. Maybe a few cows and some sage chickens might have a little argument over it, but beyond that, it is very non-political. It creates a good, safe location to house our physical gold, and so I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 101 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 101 has failed. Division having been called, all those in favor say aye. Stand up. Something. All those opposed, please stand. Okay. Thank you. Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 101 has failed 28 to 30. Third reading amendment number 3. Third reading amendment number 3, Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 101 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, this just takes the original amendments that we passed on standing committee minutes, and it conforms to that amendment. So if you go to page 1, we say may on the second page that the good treasurer can do these things. And so this follows that language. So it's on line 3, it's instead of saying requiring, it allows, allowing. And so it's more in the non-affirmative text. And then then on page 2, line 19, it strikes out for the purpose of calculating tax payments. So that should have been taken out in the prior amendment. So basically it's a cleanup. So ask for your favorable consideration.
Question having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 101 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 101 has been adopted. We are now on third reading amendment number 4, Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 101 and ask for your favorable consideration. So ladies and gentlemen, this goes back to what our discussion was earlier on this bill. And the question is, should the legislature have the ultimate decision on whether or not to direct the treasurer to do these acts? And I would submit that it makes more sense if we have two entities give recommendations to the treasurer. One would be the investment board, which is the 5 electeds, and the other would, and more importantly, is the investment funds committee. For those of you who don't know, we created the investment funds committee about 3 years ago. It currently has 7 individuals on it who all have a history of more than 10 years in investing in over $500 million as professional investors. They're essentially volunteers, but they would know how, when, and where and to invest in gold, specie, or any other type of that investment. So ask for your favorable consideration.
Question having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 101 signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 101 has been adopted. Senate File 101 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellerman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron, excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 6 aye, 55 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 101 having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 101 has failed to pass the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 107.
Senate File 107, sponsored by Senator Hicks. Acquisition, exchange, and sale of trust lands. An act relating to state lands being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 107 and ask for your favorable consideration. What this amendment does, members, is it helps to mitigate the loss or the reduction of the trust land corpus. I sent out some information. I'm not going to read all of it, but I talked with the sponsor, the good sponsor, and I understand his objectives, and I respect them. Learned a lot from the gentleman over the years when I was on the Ag Committee. But if you look at your green book, it's number 9, and it's on page 725 under Chapter 9, Sale of State Lands. We have a statement of principle that was enacted in 1997, and a key part of that statement of principle is number 2. It says the state land trust is intergenerational, therefore the focus is on protecting the corpus for the long term. And there's other related pieces of that. And then in 2005, there was a trust land management objectives decision made by the board who oversees this important area for our state. And you can read that as well, but I would just look down at the three primary objectives that are listed on that sheet there related to any proposed land transactions and related to improving the manageability of the land asset. And again, the focus of that is on minimizing the impact to the size of the corpus for the current beneficiaries as well as prospective. And so along those lines, the footnote that I referred to has expired, but the fund that's involved here is a permanent fund. It's the Common School Permanent Land Fund. And even though it's expired, the office that manages this important area still operates under that as a policy and presents the status of ownership to the board each time it contemplates a transaction. Land purchased from the Board of Land Commissioners can already be financed pursuant to existing statute. That's the main point of reading this bill, and I've read it many times. I don't see that this adds anything really to what we already have. And you all know we voted earlier today related to farm loans and the interest rate and so on, and there's an opportunity there, and I won't go into that. But I would just say briefly, the Board of Land Commissioners currently conducts all land transactions pursuant to the attached or to the trust land management objectives that I referred to, including consideration of parcel size as it relates to current revenue generation, future revenue, or appreciation potential versus administrative costs. Another key thing here is that decisions are not meant to be made. I mean, they have an objective to maximize the benefit. Decisions to maximize the benefit doesn't mean to do something for short-term revenue gain relative to the objective of maximizing the benefit. There's no mandate to do something short-term that removes our possibilities for long-term benefit. And so what this amendment does, reducing from 80 acres to 40 acres, and in the bill, there's 3 places where it's referred to, and I would just note that in 3 of those, it's up to that amount of acreage. In this case, it would go from 80 to 40, but it would be the same policy decision. And then the last one is the maximum. So that's what the amendment does, members, is it's trying to preserve what we've already put in statute, what we already have, and preserving these good trust land assets, not just for current beneficiaries, but for prospective beneficiaries. So once you sell it, we don't have it anymore. And then since statehood, there have been many acres that we have diminished the corpus. So I just ask you for that. And I provide this other information really just for the new members so you can see a lot of this already exists in current statute. And that, Mr. Speaker, is the amendment, and stand by for questions.
Representative Western for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment, and Bonnie, I really encourage you to vote no on this for a couple of reasons. Previous gentleman talked about, well, we're sacrificing return or revenue for future generations that the lands are meant to benefit. I mean, I reject that premise entirely, but if we are going to go down that line of thinking, if we sell that land, these little chunks, these 80-acre chunks, and that goes into the Common School Permanent Land Fund, that's generating right around a 5% return or so. That's going to generate way more revenue over time, especially when you compound it over decades versus just having it be on a grazing lease that's going to generate more or less the same amount over time. So I think if this is about revenue, then we definitely should sell these 80-acre chunks because it'll generate more over time when we put it in the funds through which they are managed. The reason I really encourage a no vote on this amendment is this. If you wanted to come up with a concept to make it extremely challenging for managing land, I don't think you could have done a better job than the way we do it now. The department who manages this, they manage millions of acres across the state of Wyoming that's not contiguous, different uses, all these types of things we have to manage for. And to manage on top of that, we have right around 2,500 of these little just 80-acre chunks that are strictly surrounded by private land. We're not including the ones that are tacked onto a chunk of Forest Service or BLM or any of those other ones, just those ones. So it makes management even more difficult. Regardless of what you're managing them for, the sheer bookkeeping is a lot harder. So I don't think we're certainly making it easier just from a management perspective. The reality is we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can make it easier to manage while maximizing revenue on behalf of the beneficiaries. We can do that while remaining constitutional. And so I think this amendment only makes that job that much harder. This bill is designed to go after the low-hanging fruit to make it easier to manage for agriculture, for wildlife, for sportsmen, and of course, to maximize revenue on behalf of the beneficiaries. So on and against.
Representative Slago for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment. As we talked about when this bill was talked about days past, there is a net gain, net loss clause in here. We're not going to be losing land. The goal is we're going to sell these 80-acre parcels, and at some point in time, the state will have the ability to take that money that they've gained from the sale of those and buy other state lands that are contiguous to big chunks of state land we have now. Therefore, preserving the right of our people to go out and hunt on places that have access. So on and against this amendment.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Davis for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, that amendment that he's referring to was in the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 that brought in that parameters. That was identified the corpus. And that to address that, we went above or below, increase or decrease of the 10,000 acres. So that was identified earlier in this process.
Representatives Wanitz or Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I'm generally in favor of the amendment. So this is a new thing, and really in Wyoming history, we're going to start selling our state lands, have the possibility, and my hope is we're going to trade, because I think that's how we've been doing it, and we spend a little more time and effort to do it. But if we're going to start selling off our state lands, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't start small. We could do 40 acres, come back in a year or two, say it's working, it didn't work well. And so it's always just kind of concerned me where this, and maybe someone could elucidate where the 80 acres came from, because I'm looking at the state land map. You know, there's 80 acres, there's lots of 40-acre parcels as well. And so before we take too big of a jump, I don't necessarily see the harm in saying maybe for the first year or two, let's see how many of these get put up. Let's see if they get traded. Let's see how many we have to sell before we can buy something else. So I'm sounding really conservative here, which is kind of nice, but I don't think we should take too big of a jump when it comes to selling our state lands.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman from the good capital city just said that this is new, and as a matter of fact, it's not. It's as old as statehood. If we want to have good management, there has to be some level of consolidation. I also prefer the exchange process, but in the reality, certainly from a sportsman's perspective, when it comes to public access, certainly from habitat management, from managing whole habitats, and certainly from the actual wildlife itself, whether it be herds of elk, mule deer, et cetera. I mean, 80 acres is just such a small amount, right? The ranges through which they move are hundreds of thousands of acres, millions in some cases. So I certainly appreciate the sentiment behind it, but 80 acres is starting small, really, really small. This sale process has been on the books for a long time, and it absolutely has been abused. I absolutely believe it has. I think it's gotten better in recent years, but to think that we want to put another amendment on this that hamstrings our ability for this process, for that process of consolidation, for better management, again, we're just making it harder. So I do appreciate, but on and against. Thank you.
Representative Davis for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, I would lay odds that these small parcels of land with the staffing of our department probably have not been visited to even understand what is still sitting there, in the last 10 years or so. I don't know how they're evaluating these parcels of land. So I think this only makes good sense.
Anybody else for their second time? Representative Henderson.
Well, I appreciate the debate, and I'll try to address a few of these things. Regarding walking and chewing gum, it's not so much what this bill does, it's what it doesn't do. And I would challenge you to find anywhere in this bill that has the word consolidate, which is really what we're talking about. If you read that statute I referred to and the related ones, you're going to see something that refers to an overall master plan, a strategic plan. And I know that it's being worked on. It's been worked on for many years, but it hasn't moved very far. But regarding the size of the parcels, know this: in this county where we are today, we have several of these small parcels. I spoke multiple times with the leadership at the office that manages our state lands. And here in this county, we have very small parcels that have grown in value exponentially. That's vertical, related to the development of this county. We have the largest population gain, we have major businesses coming here, and so on. And so I think if you lose the opportunity that you don't know about now, and you diminish the size of the corpus of this important trust land asset, I think you do so at the peril and not to the benefit of the beneficiaries that we're charged with protecting and helping. So I think it makes sense to go slow and to try to put a smaller bite, if you will, in place. 40 times 2 is 80. And if you wish to nominate 2 adjacent parcels that are 40, you can still do that in this amendment. But I think it helps us in terms of the offices involved here, coming up with a plan that identifies all of those parcels that are in that category of 40 and under, and provides the opportunity to do the right thing now, rather than charging full speed ahead and just diminishing this asset. By the way, this also provides a means for farm loans. And I think that's good, but we already have that. And with the other things that we've done here, with the good work, they're going to get a better rate. But I think it's better for us to look at this in terms of a more fiscally conservative perspective at this point in changing this important policy, and I'd ask you to vote for this amendment. Thank you. Call the question, Speaker.
Question having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 107 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 107 is passed. Division having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 107, please stand. Thank you. All those opposed, please stand. All right, thank you. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 107 has failed, 24-30. Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 107, and will provide a brief explanation. This amendment does 4 things. The first thing it does is really takes out the language related to sales and acquisitions and focuses it just on the exchanges. Chapter 9 in Title 36 actually has a lot of language, extensive language about the process for doing state trust land sales. And I don't really think this language in this part of the statute is necessary. But right now, there's only one line in statute related to exchanges of state trust land and private land. So the idea behind this bill, I believe, is to provide some additional statutory guidance to really encourage the Office of State Land and Investments to encourage exchanges. And I think that's a good idea. But I just think that makes sense to leave it there. The second thing it does is on page 3, it changes the definition of isolated parcel to just be one that's surrounded by private land. This clarifies that that's really what we're talking about here. The question of whether there's public access, either walking or driving, just keeps it out of it. And I think it's cleaner, and again, is a good place to start if we're going to encourage such exchanges. The third thing it does on the bottom of page 4 and on to page 5 is it actually reduces the amount of non-property that you can contribute for an exchange. And the reason for that, even though these are value for value exchanges, that we want to make sure that they're equitable as much as possible from the perspective of property, right? We don't want to exchange a really great piece of property for a whole lot of less than great property from the perspective of these are public lands. So it just drops that down from 25 to 12.5%. And finally, the last thing it does is it removes the second reading amendment that provided for the lessee's preferential right. That's currently in the bill. That's the right of last refusal. And again, that's because the Constitution in Article 18, Chapter 5 makes it clear that when it comes to the sale of state trust lands, special privileges such as that are prohibited. We took that language out in 1997 as a result of what was happening at the time. And I think it's important that we continue along those lines and make sure this is constitutional. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Representative Western. Representative Western for your
Thank you,
first
Mr. Chairman. I would like to divide the amendment. Division
Okay.
1 is lines 1 through 3. Division 2 is the balance of the amendment. Division 1 is lines 1 through 3. Division 2 is the balance of the amendment.
All right, just a second while I dig out the Eklund second reading amendment and the bill. I haven't even ruled whether this is divisible, Chairman. Is the Eklund amendment here? In this? That's I need that. I just need to see if there's anything screwy between the two. Yeah, it's divisible. All right, I'm going to rule that that is divisible. So Chairman Harshman, do you want to divide some more on this? With that, Representative Western, which division would you like to start with?
Mr. Chairman, let's go ahead and start with Division 1. Again, that's lines 1 through 3. I encourage a no vote on this because this was an amendment that was put on as a kind of a fail-safe for folks in ag who have that little 80-acre chunk that we're talking about in the middle of their ranch. This is it gives them the ability to come in and ensure that they at least have a crack, or I guess a bite at the apple, their final bite at the apple, because otherwise we're in a system where they wouldn't be able to, somebody from the other side of the state, perhaps the country comes in, nominates that for sale, they lose it, and now they're dealing with a situation where somebody who they've never met, never dealt with, now owns land and they legally have to give them access because they can go through condemning right of private action, get a road, all that stuff. And it just kind of creates a really serious headache for the folks who've been there for quite a long time. So I think that was part of the way it came out of committee, was bringing an amendment like that. So I'd like to respect the integrity of the amendment. Let's keep it there. Please vote no on Division 1.
Anybody else on Division 1? Nobody else on Division 1. All right. We're going to vote on Division 1 to third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 107. So all those in favor of Division 1 signify by saying aye. All those opposed? No. Division 1 has failed. We are now on Division 2. Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would encourage an aye vote on this. I would. I think on the balance, it does a lot of good things. I believe the most important component is lines 23 and 24. You see it takes from 25 to 12 and a half. I think this is a good thing, and this is why. At 25%, it allows someone who is nominating land for an exchange or sale, certainly in the instance of an exchange, it allows them to bring more cash to the table if it's not truly an apples for apples exchange. The way it's worded, it's supposed to be value for value, but this is kind of, I would argue, kind of a workaround that, because if it really is value for value, they need to have the same or very similar appraised values. So if I'm someone from out of state, I've got a ton of money, man, there's this really good chunk of state land near my ranch, I would love to nominate exchange, I'm gonna buy a piece of land that's not that great, that's okay, and I'm gonna bring a bunch of extra money to the table so long as it's within this 25% range. And so it's kind of, I guess it jeopardizes the integrity of that value for value concept. By lowering this to 12.5%, we're saying to those folks, no, this really does need to be true value for value. We're willing to let you bring a little bit of cash just to kind of even out the edges, but you can't bring nearly as much so that an exchange can be approved by the board. So please vote aye.
All right, all those in favor of Division 2 on third reading amendment 2 to Senate File 107 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Division 2 has weekly passed. All right, we're now on third reading amendment number 3. Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd move third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 107.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
I don't even know if I want to ask. What's your point?
Mr. Chairman, I believe this amendment is not germane to the bill, and I'd like to call Rules Committee.
Rules Committee to the front. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So the Rules Committee met in a very split decision on whether this amendment is germane. And I guess I would say the majority of the Rules Committee do believe it's germane. I'm going to rule that it's germane. And so we'll continue with the debate unless Representative Western wants to appeal my decision. No. All right, Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate that conversation with the Rules Committee. And members, really, as this bill, when you look in the title, it's about the acquisition, exchange, and sale, and we're going to bring lease into that because that legally and technically is an acquisition. And so then there's some issues we got to help our Office of State, I guess I can't say that, the office that manages our state trust lands. And these are ideas from them, from a joint committee study that we've been trying to get to the finish line so we can maximize the revenue for the beneficiaries of the trust. That's it. And that's what we all held our right hand up and swore our oath to the Constitution. And part of that is that to maximize the trust, the beneficiary trust. So, Mr. Speaker, just quickly, it adds that lease of residential in 99 years. It is so important. One of the biggest truck stops in Wyoming is on a trust parcel. And to get these commercial and this residential will be a huge help for our affordable housing issues. Many of these are located right next to the city limits or in the city limits. And they'll provide an incredible resource. These aren't grazing parcels not out in the middle of somebody's farm. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about these right next to these places that need more room for housing. There's a few of them in the state, but the 99-year piece is very important for financing. That's what we're hearing, particularly on these industrial commercial pieces. And then the recreation piece, the office asked us to update that. The office also on the sale on page 2 of the amendment, Mr. Speaker, asked us to let this negotiation when they're sold go on, but at 90 days, then we got to go with the 3 disinterested folks who will value that, the appraisers. And then finally, if a person owns a commercial, a truck stop or something on a state land and they sell that, we need to clarify in statute on page 238 that it'll be sold for market value. And right now, that's not clear in statute. So that's the problems we're trying to fix, Mr. Chairman. And then finally, I think on section 4 of that amendment, you'll see that it doesn't harm the current bill at all. The bill moves forward. But I wanted to put in section 4 that nothing in this act shall be deemed to limit the Board of Land Commissioners to manage state land. They believe that already, but I want to put that in there so this bill can survive to the finish line, because I don't think it'll get a signature without that. I think if we start telling the 5 electeds that, hey, we're now managing state lands, I don't think it's going to go very well. And then the other part, Mr. Speaker, on paragraph B, under that section 4, this shall not apply to any exchange or sale of parcels within the boundaries of Grand Teton National Park. There are 6 or 7 of these, 80 parcels or less. And we just had a long discussion about gold. These are more valuable than any gold. Never sell these. Never exchange unless it's for the real price for them. And you know, there's one that was done a few years ago at this Broyles Hill. I don't know. We have some lessons on how not to do it. And hopefully we've learned our lessons. The most valuable land in the world. So that's the amendment, Mr. Speaker, and I'd stand for any questions. Appreciate your support on the amendment.
Sensing your urge to vote, all those not sensing your urge to vote. Representative Penn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment, to me, it seems like this significantly reroutes the intent of this bill. Also, I was under the impression that these parcels that we're discussing were supposed to be landlocked. If you're saying that these are next to city limits or within city limits, how are we still dealing with landlocked parcels? Thank you.
Representative Davis.
Mr. Speaker, I'm on and against this amendment. I would urge the body to go and review a Senate Ag Committee where this amendment was brought forth and listen to the discussion on it. There's two sides here on this, but once again, the Senate Ag Committee, can I say that? That committee did away with it. But anyway, this is not the first time we've seen this verbiage of this amendment, and I just don't think this is a good verbiage the way it's set up. I understand the intent of the good bringer, but I don't think this is the proper way to bring it in. Thank you.
And we really shouldn't talk about actions of the other body. We do it all too much, and the longer we go, the more we do of it. And it's kind of natural now that we're crossed the bills over to do that, but it's just good policy not to do that. So with that, Representative Slagle for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question for the bringer of this bill. If we change this lease to a 99-year lease compared to 75, how often does that lease rate change? In agricultural lease, every 10 years, our lease gets changed at least. And so, I mean, that's a concern I have. If lease is set for 99 years, it kind of locks in the amount of money we're going to get for our state lands. On and against this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Crago, no. Representative Western for your first time.
Members, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to keep this short and sweet. This is familiar language. We've seen it before. We've dealt with it before. Certainly appreciate the intent. And I think the amendment in and of itself has good intentions, but I think we need to stick to what we're trying to do here. And what the intent of this bill is to encourage a program to go after the low-hanging fruit so we can consolidate this land so it's better for our management objectives, the ones that are in statute, as well as taking care of public access, sportsmen, wildlife, habitat, et cetera. So please vote no.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time? First time, Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think this is a good amendment. It actually helps the bill do something beneficial for the state. You know, it's not related to what we can already do. And I think it provides a beneficial purpose that the Board of Land Commissioners could consider it. It's not prescriptive, but it's enabling. And so I think it's a good amendment. We should vote for it. I mean, I'm not trying to kill the bill. I think it does a good job of doing that itself, but I just think that this is a good amendment. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Chairman Harshman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the good debate. Couple questions. I think start with the last one first, on the 10-year ag leases. Those are, I think, in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. I think that's been there for a long time. And then I think on the landlocked piece, that's in a different section which has now been amended to just do exchanges. And so that's in a different section. So with that, I appreciate the debate and I encourage your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 107 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Chair is in doubt. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 3, please rise. Chairman Harshman, stay put. Thank you. You may sit down now. All those against, please rise. Thank you. Third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 107 has failed, 2435. The representative, let's see, we have a number 5. Representative Harshman, third reading amendment number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the next, just clarification for the body, the third reading amendment number 4 is a delete the enacting clause, so we'll bring that last. This 5 is this section 4, which I think is really important to add to this bill. That is not going to limit the requirement of the Board of Land Commissioners to manage state trust lands under their asset management policy. I think it's going to be a really important statement if this bill is to be successful. And then paragraph B, that this will not affect parcels inside Grand Teton National Park. We already talked about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Yin for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This makes it almost even more unconstitutional because it makes it special legislation to exempt out one piece of the state of Wyoming. Thank you.
I think that was a no on that, maybe. Anyway, anybody else for their first time? Question being called. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 107 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 107 has failed. Now, Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 107, and it would ask for your favorable consideration. I will withdraw it at the appropriate time, Mr. Speaker. So when we started with this bill a while back, I was sort of ambivalent. There are good parts of the bill, and there are bad parts of the bill. And I think as I read the bill, the original intent was to try to help consolidate state lands. And or sell some of these state lands to increase income for the school corpus. As we're sitting now, and then the third thing was really to help some of our ag producers to also consolidate some of these state lands, because the consolidation of these state lands will help them in the long run. We've talked a lot. We've had several bills pass through this House and the other end talking about trespass and hunting and public access, which is an issue we all need to work on. And I think one of the goals of this bill, or at least one of the results of this bill, would have been that. As we stand here today, I'd say the bill is dramatically different than where we started. And when I was ambivalent at first, like I said, as I stand here now, I'm no longer ambivalent. I think it's sending us in a wrong direction, and it's creating a focus on these lands in a way, not promoting ag as the way I want it to do, not protecting ag in the way I want it to do. And I guess what I would rather see us do, and this is a bigger picture, and I think it's a bigger picture discussion that we could have over the interim, or over the next couple years, or over the next 5 years, however long it takes to get to the right answer about how we start solving this problem. And I think we need to look at it through a big lens and not through one little bill. And that's where we are right now. And I'm afraid we're going to send a wrong message, not only to the public, but also to our state lands office, telling them to do something that I'm not sure we want them to do. And we don't, maybe we need to step back, take a deep breath, and figure out exactly what it is we want to do and how we want to get there, because this bill, I don't think, gets us there. The other thing I would say is by not passing the bill, we're not changing law, right? You can already nominate parcels for sale. You can already nominate parcels for trade, for transfer, whatever word you want to use. We're not changing the law, but what we're doing is putting a focus on these very small areas. And if you go look in the statute and you look at what state lands has to do when they decide to trade or sell or acquire state lands, there's a list of things. And if you read this bill into the statute, it reads uniquely, let me put it that way. And I'm not sure why. That's a question I've had since the very first time I read the bill. And as I stand here today, now it really causes me concern. And so, I don't want to belabor the point, Mr. Speaker, but I'm going to ask for a no vote on the bill, and let's regroup. I actually asked for this as an interim topic, and I think it's something we can work on going forward, and hopefully we can all work together. There's a lot of stakeholders on this issue. I think all of us actually in this room from various points of view. Let's make sure we get to the right point, and let's do it all together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Western for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Technically, I can't argue with a single thing that was just said. They were all valid points. However, I think we need to view this issue in the bigger context. We talk about, well, let's put it to the interim, have a more comprehensive discussion that includes all the factors. That conversation has been going on since this state was founded. How do we manage these lands? What can we do with them? What should the office do in managing them? Look, this bill is just going after the low-hanging fruit. If we were much more ambitious, we can go after the chunks of state land that are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of acres. If we did that, man, just an army of folks come out of everywhere, hooting and hollering, really angry for whatever reason, depending on how they look at these issues, whether it's sportsmen, agriculture, a land prospector from out of state, whoever they may be. The simple reality is that this is just one little step towards trying to fix a problem that's been on the books for a long time. And there have been a lot of initiatives over the years. Does this bill actually solve that problem? No. No, it does not. But it does take a little step in the right direction towards doing it. These sales have been going on for a long time, and I've been pretty upset about them. Because some of these, from the perspective of sportsmen, some of these sales have really hurt sportsmen, our ability to pursue high-quality game on the lands that we all own, that the state of Wyoming owns. So if we want to vote this down, that's fine, but we are putting ourselves right back in the same position we've been this entire time, completely unable to make any progress or make very little progress in trying to solve this problem. So if we want to vote it down, that's fine, but we're putting us right back in the situation with no progress we can speak of. So against the amendment, for the bill. Thank you.
Representative Nyman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would have to fully agree with the good representative from the Johnson County area. I really did appreciate and would love to have had this bill move ahead on the amendment and everything, against the amendment, but also speaking against the bill. This is a conversation, as the good representative said, is going to have to take place, and this body or the next body after it is going to be confronted with a major issue that is getting larger every day. And that is the conflict between public land users and private landholders that are trying to deal with working with that. So this is, in my opinion, is not the vehicle to get us there. While it might be a small framework that would allow the conversation, ultimately, this is going to be a larger issue that is going to have to be dealt with on a broader scope. And so I would be against the bill, against the amendment body, and also against the bill.
Anybody else? Chairman Eklund.
So Mr. Speaker, I would probably like to add that what we do with our state lands has to be like eating an elephant one bite at a time. This isn't really a big chunk we're talking about, but it puts a focus on a big chunk of what goes on in Wyoming. There's an encouragement to do land exchanges. That would probably benefit everybody. That'd be the best way to get this done rather than selling the land. The land exchanges presently are very difficult, complicated processes, and the Ag Committee will try to endeavor during the interim to make a streamlined exchange process. And I think little things like that will probably benefit our problem with state lands as much as anything. This bill has become, I'm just kind of baffled and confused as to why we're even bringing it. So I would encourage a no vote on the bill, and let us try to fix some things before we pass something like this.
Representative Burkhart, Chairman Burkhart, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Body, looking at this, it confused me a little bit. The preamble talks about state trust lands, and that's the only mention. If you go into the bill, they also mention lands specifically, not just state trust lands. And the state does own land that is not state trust land. They've picked it up off of bad debts, just acquiring a ranch that they owed the state money. I know where that one of those are. It's a beautiful piece of property, but it was never listed as a state trust land in the Act of Admission or in the Constitution, which are designated for the benefit of the state. So that confused me, and I would tell you to go and look in those statutes and read all of the statutes before you vote on this bill, which I know means quite a bit of reading right now. All of this brought to mind a situation that goes back many years, well before I was in the legislature, and it was published in the local newspaper. An individual offered to swap some land with the state. In return, they were going to swap 3 times what they got from the state. And if you've seen those ad announcements in the paper, they give you the legals on it. I managed to sit down with maps and go through the legals because they all looked a little odd to me. And these were all these small little parcels scattered all over the place. The interesting thing is every one of those little parcels that was being asked to pick up controlled a water supply. And that the state had kept so that the state controlled the water supply, not an individual landowner. And in those days, you could write a letter and object to the sale, which I did at the time, even though I had no interest in any of the land. What the state would have got was quite a few acres of very pristine reclaimed mine land, if you think that's worth owning. So this bill makes me think of that situation where you offer to trade a piece of land, it's 72 acres, and I just picked that number. And it looks really good on paper till you go look at it. And you find out what's on that 72 acres that you're going to give up from state land. And I'd say sometimes it's way more valuable than what you get, even though the land may be a lot more area. So I would just ask you to really consider those things on this. And I would say I'm for the amendment and against the bill.
Representative Davis, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm for the amendment, and now I am against the bill. I think there's been a lot of things brought up here. Previous bringer of an amendment has very valid points here. That needs to be addressed in this as we're going forth. So once again, I'm for the amendment and against the bill.
Anybody else? Question, you want to wrap us up, Representative Crago?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't have anything to add. I withdraw my amendment.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 4, and he was withdrawn, so Senate File 107, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Alaman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron, excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stiff, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers.
No.
Are there any changes? Berger, aye to no. Further changes? Provenza, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 2 aye, 59 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 107, having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 107 has failed to pass the House. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have 6 bills left on third reading and 14 amendments. So, something to contemplate as we all go to the mic. And I want to take a moment. Do you have a privilege? I want to take a moment. I just kind of got this and to recognize one of our own here. Representative Don Burkhart has been nationally recognized with the Patrick Henry Award for his contributions to the Wyoming National Guard. Burkhart, one of 9 recipients nationwide, was presented the award by Major General Greg Porter, Wyoming's Adjutant General. Representative Burkhart has been recognized in the highest manner possible by the men and women of the Wyoming National Guard, Porter said. His diligence, vision, and leadership while serving the people of Wyoming as a senior representative and chairman of the House Transportation and Military Affairs Committee is notable, and he is absolutely deserving of his recognition as a Patrick Henry Award winner. The Patrick Henry Award is designed to provide recognition to local officials and civic leaders who, in a position of great responsibility, distinguished themselves with outstanding and exceptional service to the armed forces of the United States, the National Guard, or the National Guard Association of the United States. So congratulations, Representative Burkhart. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 109.
Senate File 109, sponsored by Senator Salazar, prohibiting chemical abortions, an act relating to abortions being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have an amendment. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully withdraw my third reading amendment.
Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 109 has been withdrawn. Senate File 109 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellamand, Allred, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Berger, Brown, Burkhart, Byron excused, Chadwick, Chestick, Clauston, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Harrelson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Berger, excused to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 56 aye, 5 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 109, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 109 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 120.
Senate File 120, sponsored by Senator Barlow. Restoration of Civil Rights, an act relating to crimes and criminal procedure being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Okay, we have amendments, but the first one is delete the enacting clause, so we'll go to the third reading amendment number 2, which is Representative Harrelson. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So at this time, I withdraw third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 120.
Yay. Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 120 has been withdrawn. The next one is Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Third reading amendment number 3, I move it now to Senate File 120 and ask for your favorable consideration. So as the conversation went forward in our committee meeting, how it currently stands in the bill is that an individual who has a nonviolent felony can be restored back to their voting rights once they're done with their sentence and or parole. This would go a step further and create a 5-year plan for the restoration of the rest of their civil rights. And what we're saying here is just elimination of that 5 years. So once they've served their time, they can request to receive their rights back. And I believe this is just, this cleans it up. Let's not make it complicated or confusing. And at the end of the day, once they've served their time, they've served their time. I find it very interesting that we, in essence, are almost sentencing them to another 5 years of punishment after they have served their crime. So I believe this would just clean it up and create it where we could just see one restoration of rights after they get done with their sentence. And so I'd ask for your favorable consideration.
Representative Oakley for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I would urge a no vote on the amendment. So obviously without us, like currently, and we haven't passed this, and so these were rights that it was forever. And so we're taking a look at that, saying that's too long. We also heard testimony, some states that are looking at this are 20 years, 10 years, something like that. We actually went very conservatively, I would say, at 5 years. There is an element of punishment that's involved and some other things as well, but in being convicted with a felony, it's difficult. It's not like we can bring all the victims of felony crimes here in front of you, but I promise you, there's some really significant things that happen that end in felony convictions, right? And in addition to that, I think it actually gives some time for the process to work, so they get done with their sentence and their probation. and then there's this period of time, you know, and then it can start, and then it can be administered. It also seems strange to kind of like immediately restore it. It doesn't really seem to fit with the process of what we're doing. So I think it works with what we've got. I think we went conservatively. Actually, even originally we had, anyway, it doesn't matter. We just tried to keep this very clean, saying 5 years after your sentence is completed. I think it works. I think both policy-wise and for administering this program. So I would urge a no vote on the amendment.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Harrelson, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So in the testimony that we heard, there are multiple states that it is automatically restored upon completion of sentence. This isn't automatic. They still would have to request it. So there's that next level where it'd have to be reviewed. We also, upon speaking to the director of this department, he said, you know, he goes, I believe this is a great idea to restore because we see a lot better outcomes out of these individuals once we do restore. So I think one of the things that we need to be very careful of is we don't create too murky a water. They don't know how to go through this water. So I think this would just be a way to clean it up. Honestly, if it was up to me, I think we should restore it upon completion of sentence automatically. I think that's intelligence. Obviously not for violent felons. I'm not asking that in any way, but I'm saying for these nonviolent felons, I mean, I'm going to give a case. There's an individual that I'm aware of that made a dumb decision when it came to some money fraud. Well, you know, that was a dumb decision, but that doesn't mean that that individual is a threat to society in that way. So I believe this would be an appropriate measure. This is a good next step. Is it as far as I would like to go? No, but I think it's a good next step. So I would ask for your aye vote, and with that, I call for the question.
Question being called. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 120 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Chair is in doubt. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 3, please rise. All those opposed, please rise. Please stand still. In favor, 27 against. Yeah. All right. Please sit. So third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 120 has passed 28 to 27. The next amendment is third reading amendment number 1, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 120. Will withdraw at the appropriate time, which probably will be just a moment or two. I'm an old soldier, and every soldier knows his general orders. The first general order is I will guard everything within the limits of my post and quit my post only when properly relieved. The obligation there is that when you see a danger, to alert your fellow that you see a danger. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm almost never wrong. Folks, I wholeheartedly agree with what is being attempted with this bill. I'm all about restoration, especially in this important area of our Wyoming lifestyle. I just want to be very careful. I don't want us to leave an open door and opportunity for harm to come to my treasured Second Amendment. So I raise this. I'm asking you to vote your conscience. Thank you.
Would you please withdraw that amendment?
I quickly withdraw this amendment.
So third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 120 has been withdrawn. Senate File 120, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellamand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron, excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman? Harshman?
Excused.
Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? I'm sorry, Knapp? Larson Lloyd?
Excused.
Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Larson Lloyd, excused to I. Harshman, excused to I. Walters? Excused to I. Further changes? Conrad, I to no. Locke, I to no. Jennings, I to no. Washut, I to no. Further changes? Ottman, I to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 34 aye, 27 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 120, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 120 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 133.
Senate File 133, sponsored by Senator Schuler, Student Eligibility in Interscholastic Sports, an act relating to education, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments Let me see whose amendment the first one is. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move third reading amendment to Senate File 133 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members of the body, this looks complicated, but it's very simple in what I've attempted here. Anywhere during the standing committee amendment that we passed where it referenced school, we put high in front of school, so a high school. I'm taking the high back out and then redefining school to be grades 7 through 12. So this applies to 7th graders all the way up through 12th graders. Members, we all know that puberty starts early. The national average for girls is 11 years old. For boys, it's 12 years old. That's when parents start buying shoes for their kids every 6 months because their feet are growing so fast. That's when these kids start putting on 2 to 3 inches of height every year. So at 12 years old, that's where some of these kids are having to take puberty blockers if they want to stop the transition, so or start having a transition. So what I'm trying to do is just lower from 9th grade down to 7th grade to be a little bit more encompassing for the boys and girls that are in sports. And I stand for questions, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Stiff for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, just a question for the bringer of the amendment. I know for football, 7th grade girls often play on the boys' team right now. And so if we adopt this, will they no longer be able to compete on the boys' team? How does that work?
Chairman Northrup for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reason we went with high school is because, quite frankly, the Wyoming High School Association, which is named in the bill, is the high school association. And since they're going to be the body that's going to govern this, we've decided to leave it in the high school. Also, let's take one bite of the apple at a time. Let's work on the high school side, get a few years of experience on that, and then we'll move into the junior high if that becomes necessary, and it probably will, but I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. Boys don't mature nearly as fast as girls do. Myself, when I was in junior high, I was a stick, and needless to say, any girl could have whipped my ass at that time.
I'm glad I missed that. Representative Larson Lloyd.
So I've got a question back to the bringer. So if we do this, we adopt it, then does that still leave it under the jurisdiction of the association that oversees interscholastic activities? And if it takes that out, okay, because then it fits probably. But if we leave that in there, I don't think they have jurisdiction, or maybe I'm wrong, because do they have jurisdiction over junior high athletic or sporting events? And so to clean that, if they don't, then it's challenged, I think, a little bit. So if you could clear those up for me to help me know how to vote.
Representative Davis for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This was brought up by many parents in our area there, and it was a concern, and they would like to see this because with the injuries that are occurring in these sports at the junior high level, which would be what, 7th and 8th, or, they're really concerned about that happening there. So they think it's a good idea to have this all the way down to there. Thank you.
Representative Brown for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was going to stay silent on this bill and kind of just listen to the body, but on this particular amendment, I've been kind of battling it since reading it this morning, kind of trying to take a look at how I really felt I was going to vote on this. And ultimately what I came to was the real discussion that went back and I listened to in committee, I've heard throughout the interim, I've heard from my constituents, is really about these athletes, specifically in the high school sports. When they're attempting to go to state, this has an impact on their collegiate career. This has impacts on things that are really going to be impactful for the rest of their lives. And when I started thinking about that and looking at 7 through 8, I'm not positive that 7th and 8th grade is really going to be that heavy duty impactful time in a child's life that they're going to be writing this out. And then the conversation that was just talked about was, we want to have this discussion right now because the injuries that are potentially occurring, well, we all know it's just the way science reads, that females are developing faster than males at this age. So they're actually going to be bigger than the males when they're walking in 7th and 8th grade most of the time. So I'm not necessarily as worried about them coming into this sport as much as I would be the other way around. And as the good chairman of education just stated, it's the same way. And when I was in 7th and 8th grade, there was plenty of females that were bigger than I was. I was a runt until my 9th or 10th grade year. And so I don't think I like this particular amendment. And I think some other questions being raised by the vice chair of appropriations as well about the association that has the jurisdiction over this right now has jurisdiction over high school sports. They don't have jurisdiction over junior high sports. And so I feel like that's muddying the waters, and we're kind of getting into a little bit more of the area of where we're wanting to go with this. I fully support this bill. But with this amendment, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring it down into a little bit too much of the waters that we don't want to wade into quite yet. And I think that the biggest opportunity that we have right here is to protect the women that are in these sports as things are going through, when they have impact on their lives for the rest of their lives, for collegiate sports, for going to state, for having that medal, whatever the case may be. We want to make sure that we're protecting those timeframes. 7th and 8th grade, I'm not sold on the idea that 7th and 8th grade timeframe is the time that we need to be protecting. So on and against this amendment for the bill.
Representative Penn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for this amendment, currently our middle school kids do follow the Wyoming High School Association guidelines. When they come in for sports physicals, we fill out the same form, the high school form for the middle school kids for their sports participation physicals. Maybe they aren't directly regulated, but they do still follow the same guidelines as the high school kids. Thank you.
Representative Hornock for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to Rules 12-4, I'd like to call for the ayes and noes on this.
2 seconds. Slagle and Pendergraft. Okay. Representative Trujillo for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for this amendment, I'm going to give you an example of my son and a travel basketball team that we started in 5th grade. In 5th grade, we started these travel teams so they can be prepared for high school basketball. It's a very competitive sport, very few spots in college. So when you're looking to 7th and 8th grade sports, I would hope that even though they're not part of the high school thing, that they would use common sense and common sense, actually, to abide by the guidelines that are being set in the high school and the high school spots. On and for this amendment.
Representative Harrelson for your first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I want to just address something that came up a couple speakers back, that whenever you're in high school, that girls are usually bigger than boys, and that we're going to walk down that path and have that conversation. So I just pulled up the Junior Olympic Track and Field Championship start heights. So this is going to be high jump and pole vault. So when you're down in the 8 and 9-year-olds, they keep them at the same height. Why? Because we're before puberty. But when we get into the 13 and 14-year-olds, we see that the high jump for girls is 4 foot 3 inches. The high jump for boys, 4 foot 9 inches, 6-inch difference for a start out height. We jump into the pole vault, no pun intended. 13 and 14-year-old girls, we're looking at a 6 foot height for a start out height, and boys are 7 foot 4. Now let's jump to the next age category. So these are the categories we're talking about right now in this amendment. We're talking the next age category would be a 7 foot height for girls start out and a 10 foot 8 for boys. You see what we're talking about? So I need to respectively push back on the fact that this 7th grade level, 8th grade level doesn't matter. It does matter. That 2 years, if we're looking at the starting heights for these track and field events, and that's just one example, they are putting a differentiation in there. Not below that. When you're talking about 8 and 9-year-olds, no differentiation, but you start getting into those teen years and they do that differentiation. So I believe that it only goes, and I heard, well, this doesn't affect state. Well, let's just ask something as a parent, and you're standing there watching your daughter pole vault at age 13, and then you see, at age 13, I was my height. I had an early growth spurt. I was maybe an inch shorter than I am now at age 13. And you see me walk out against your daughter to pole vault. Let's ask that question. Are you going to be okay with that? Are you okay with the fact that at age 13, you could have a 5'10", 5'9", 5'11" young man go out to pole vault against your daughter? No, it's not affecting state, but it is definitely going to be affecting morale. It's going to be affecting identity. It's going to be affecting a lot of other things, and if nothing else, it's definitely going to affect your dinner conversation. So let's on and for this amendment. Let's get it moving forward.
Representative Angelos for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I wanted to address, we heard about that this is muddying the waters, and I actually had a couple constituents ask me this question. They said, how can we allow junior high kids to compete and then tell them in high school that they can no longer do that? So that is really muddying the waters. It's confusion, it's causing confusion. It's okay now, but it's not okay later. And another thing is, I have 3 girls. 2 are in high school, 1 is in junior high, and junior high boys in 8th grade are extremely tall. I don't know if you've walked down a hall, they're much taller than I am. Actually, 6th grade boys in my daughter's elementary school last year were taller than I was. They were huge. So they do actually, puberty is coming on earlier. And so that's something that I want to address. From my constituents, they don't feel it's fair to tell these kids, you can play in junior high, but you can't play in high school. On and for the amendment.
Representative Sherwood for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members of the body, I would like to, I think that we're getting confused with the concept of play and competition. At this age, our youth are still learning about collaboration, about teamwork, about their own individual strengths, and just the joy of sheer play for the entertainment value of it, not the competition value of it. Now, yes, some of us are more competitive than others, but I think limiting the opportunities of our citizens, our valuable citizens, to play and to have this experience to make us more well-rounded human beings, I think this is a travesty to take away this opportunity. And I would argue that maybe all of us should engage in more play to bring joy to our lives. Thank you.
Representative Ward for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am on and for this amendment, and I just wanted to say, for those of you who don't think this is a problem in Wyoming, this issue has already been brought up at a local school in my hometown. So I encourage and I vote, please. Thank you.
Representative Conrad for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Understanding what words can and cannot be used now, I will share with you, I think confused is appropriate in this case. Does the Wyoming High School Athletic Association recognize junior high sports or interscholastic activities, or is it specifically high school? Because I think there's some contradiction in this language of what we're trying to accomplish here. Apologize, I'm not I see the good coach getting up. Maybe he can help explain that. Thank you.
Representative Harshman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I can say it, it's mentioned in the bill, the group that regulates high school activities in Wyoming, the WHSAA, does not regulate junior high. And I've heard that said that it does, and it does not. I just want to be very clear. And whether you're for or against this amendment, they do not. So I think that how that's going to work on an appeal and all that, I don't know. So with that, and this whole thing is, and I teach kids, taught for 37 years, and I think things have changed. It's really, I was talking to a third grade teacher back home this weekend, and I don't know where this is all coming from. But it's not your school teachers. And I think a lot of it is this thing, I saw that, I guess that's a prop, I can't use it, but I think, anyway, so I just, but anyway, back to my point in the question, Mr. Speaker, this WHSA is 9 through 12. Thank you.
Representative Clouston for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to confirm what Coach said. This is something we studied in the committee. It's something several people wanted. We found out that that organization does not have any control. So I'm going to encourage you to resist this amendment because I think it could jeopardize the bill. And then to answer the good attorney who's always sharp dressed from the western part of the state, this only applies to males in female sports. So if there's a female girl who wants to participate in boys football, and a lot of them can kick the ball well, they still can do that. Thank you.
Representative Lawley for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just to give another perspective in terms of whether or not how the High School Activities Association interplays in the bill, and to understand they come into play again in that fallback. So during the fallback time, if the ban is determined to be either enjoined or it's determined to be invalid, and what the High School Activity Association does, in effect, is appoint an independent commission. And it's that independent commission that will interact with any of these issues, no matter what grade the child is in. So, my view of that is that it's really not that relevant if the High School Activities Association it interacts now with junior high sports or middle school sports so much, because it's this commission. And so, we originally had the bill before amended in the Standing Committee amendment actually was K through 12. And we were cutting that down, and I actually did support and still support the idea of middle school being involved, primarily because of arguments that's been raised here, that to me it is particularly heartbreaking to have them involved in a middle school for a grade or two and then to be told they can't participate in high school. So again, I say vote your conscience on this, but I don't think that we can really say, well, because it's the High School Activities Association and the fallback, that we can't drop down. I think we can, and the bill can do that, and the commission can that's the place they go to appeal in the fallback. So that's, I guess I'd say probably on and for the amendment.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for the second time before the sponsor? Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the debate. I just clarify and to reiterate a couple of things that's already been said. This bill, as I understand it, will not discount any co-ed sports that are already out there. This is strictly for those that are boys or those that are girls. It's not, if you can play in a co-ed sports, like as mentioned, the football team where it's already having co-ed, I don't think this bill would change anything there. As far as the Athletic Association, I don't discount what the good coach has said. He knows a lot more about this than I do. Some of the constituents in my area, of my constituents, they sent me some of the paperwork. If your child wants, or your kid wants to play sports in junior high, it has the same parental agreement, consent form, and the exact same physical form that has the title of Wyoming Athletic Association on top. And that was reiterated by the good nurse practitioner from the center part of our state. So I appreciate the comments from the attorney from where they make sugar. Appreciate her comment that there is a fallback commission to support junior high and these children as they play sports. So I think with what we've got in the bill, it'll hold up, and this will extend to the 7th graders to protect those from the same things that we're trying to protect for our high school athletes. So I urge an aye vote on this bill and an aye on this amendment. Thank you.
Question is, shall third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 133 be adopted? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Yes. Aye. Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Burkhart, no to aye. Harshman, aye to no. Larson JT, no to aye. Further changes? Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 42 aye, 19 no, 1 excused.
Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 133 has been adopted. Now we're on third reading amendment number 2, Representative Clauston.
Mr. Speaker, I respectfully withdraw my amendment to Senate File 133.
Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 133 has been withdrawn. Senate File 133 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 51 aye, 10 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 133, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 133 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 137.
Senate File 137, sponsored by Senator Steinmetz. Subdivisions, fencing requirements, an act relating to planning and zoning being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Larson JT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I bring to you, or I'd like to move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 137 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, this is just a little bit of wordsmithing on page 2, lines 7 and 8. This is just matching current language and statute in 11-28-106B. It uses the same language when describing the contractor being responsible for the construction of. So if there's no questions, I'd ask for the question.
Question having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 137 signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 137 has been adopted. We're now on third reading amendment number 2. Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 137 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, so because it doesn't really, can't really tell you what it is just by reading the amendment, I'd ask you to turn the bill to page 4 if you can, and then pull out the second reading amendment number 1, and then I'll give you a second to do that. So members, if you look on page 4, and then you see where it says on line 15, there's a Romanet 2, but what had happened was in the standing committee amendment, it deleted the colon and the Romanet I, but left the Romanet 2. So all this does is a little bit of a technical correction to make sure that that Romanet I is still in there. So I'll just ask for your favorable consideration. It's just a technical correction, and ask for your favorable consideration, Mr. Speaker.
All right, question having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 137 signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 137 has been adopted. Senate File 137 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellamand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron, excused. Chadwick. Chestick. Klauston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Harrelson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. O'Hearn.
Excused.
Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers.
Aye.
Are there any changes? Harshman. Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 51 aye, 9 no, 2 excused.
Senate File 137, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 137 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 181. I've got 181, I don't know. Yeah. I already called it, Senate File 181.
Senate File 181, sponsored by Senator Schuler. Drug-induced homicide, an act relating to crimes and offenses being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Provenza is a delete. So the next one would be third reading amendment number 2, which would be Singh on Senate File 181.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 181, and I respectfully withdraw it at this time.
Representative Singh, I think your amendment is third reading amendment number 2.
Oh, 2, I'm sorry, yes.
So remove that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 181, and I respectfully withdraw it at this time.
No.
Point of order.
Oh, you're not a delete the enacting clause. That's Provenza's. You are some other kind of amendment.
I'm just trying to withdraw the amendment.
Usually, so Representative Singh, you would remove it at the appropriate time? Is that what you said? I don't know what I heard you say then.
I withdraw it at this time.
Oh, you withdraw it. Thank you. So third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 181 has been withdrawn, and I couldn't hear it because there's too much noise out there. And my ears aren't that good anyway. So the next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 3, Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully withdraw third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 181.
Yay, I heard that one. Third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 181 has been withdrawn. We are now on third reading amendment number 4, and that would be Representative Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully withdraw third amendment reading number 4.
Third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 181 has been withdrawn. Now, Representative Provenza, no, Yin, we got a Yin one? I'm looking here. All right. Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I respectfully withdraw third reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 181.
Third reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 181 has been withdrawn. Now, Representative Provenza, I think we're at yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully withdraw third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 181.
All right. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 181 has been withdrawn. Senate File 181 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron, excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Clouston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Allemand, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 23 aye, 38 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 181 having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 181 has failed to pass the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 151. The last one on the list, Representative Penn.
I need to read it in, sir.
Oh, we need to read it in. Dang it. Let's get right to it.
Senate File 151, sponsored by Senator Hutchings. Wyoming Prescription Drug Transparency Act, an act relating to the insurance code being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
All right. Now, Representative Penn, sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I move third reading number 1 to Senate File 151 and ask for your favorable consideration. So what this amendment does is restore the language to include brand name drugs. So the pharmacists have the ability to appeal if they are reimbursed less than what the drug costs them. So currently they have that ability on generic drugs, but not brand name drugs. And typically those are the ones that they end up losing the most money on. So this simply just allows the appeal process. It doesn't guarantee that they'll get more money for it, but it lets them make that appeal. I would ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Chairman Zwanitzer for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate the bringer bringing the amendment. I know we talked on second reading that this was a possibility, and originally I thought about co-sponsoring it as well. Went back and talked to people and insurance and benefit plans and the whole rigmarole the last 24 hours. And there seems to be just some, I would call it general low-lying concern that they're, let me go back real fast. So when we talk about maximum allowable cost, we have maintained that definition to generic drugs only under maximum allowable cost. And so when we allow appeals, and MAC is only for generic drugs, and so you'll see in this section on page 6, we're only doing, you can only really appeal MAC on generics. And so if you add branded and brand effective rates, there's this conversation that, well, what other things can you resolve disputes on if it's not price? And again, it's one of those things they're not exactly sure. And so talking to people, I would love to say I don't think it hurts anything, but there's some people out there who are concerned that it does, and they can't quite tie that appeal process of brands when MAC is only tied to generics. And again, this is all moving kind of so fast before a lot of people are ready and can really study it that they're not comfortable with it. So I guess I'm not comfortable with it right now, and therefore asking you not to quite be comfortable with allowing this year in the statutory change. And so I'd resist the amendment.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody? Representative Oakley? No. Representative Penn, I think for your second time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the reason this is important is because this is actually the class of drugs where pharmacies are under reimbursed the most. And so it's important for that reason. It isn't the job of the pharmacies to subsidize this cost difference. And that's what ends up happening if we don't have this language in the bill. So I would strongly ask for your support. Thank you.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 151 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 51 has been adopted. Division having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1, please rise. Thank you. All opposed, please rise. Less than 33. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 51 has been adopted. Next amendment would be Representatives Chairman Zwanitzer. Third reading amendment 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To move third reading amendment number 2. Ladies and gentlemen, there's 2 of the things we talked about yesterday.
Did you move that?
I would move third reading amendment number 2 once again to Senate File 151.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker. So the 2 things that I'm attempting to, again, remove from the bill. First is this conversation we need to have on spread pricing on page 4. And so right now the language reads that a PBM shall not allow spread pricing. So not to get too much in the weeds, but happy to answer questions. Spread pricing, it's a negotiated contract that your PBM will have with their client. So we're talking about a business arrangement they set forward. And so regardless if you like PBMs or you think they're the most evil things on the planet, I just want to make sure this is still contractual law we're discussing. And so this is basically, drugs are a commodity and the price goes up and the price goes down over the course of a year. So if you're an insurer, you're a benefit plan, you want to be able to set a price at the beginning of the year, and you want to know what those drugs are going to cost your members, right? And so you set a contract a year in advance, and therefore you know by setting that contract that if drug prices go up or down, sometimes they do go down, and if they go down within that contract, right, the PBM would keep that spread pricing. If they go up, the PBM eats it. But for certainty and assurity for that benefit plan, they can therefore do all those fun actuarial calculations and figure out what they need to charge their members, knowing the price of all the cost of the drugs they're going to get for that contractual term, usually a year. And so by taking the spread pricing concept out and saying a PBM shall not allow it, I mean, I ultimately think what you're doing is hurting, you know, the very people who are on these plans because then they don't have a set price. And if you have a weird year and a medication goes sky high and somebody on that plan is on that medication, all of a sudden you have a hit to that plan in the middle of the year, unexpected. And so, and there's no mandate that you have to use a PBM once again. And so all this amendment's saying is you can't conduct spread pricing without the consent of the benefit plan. If they know and they agree, because it's a contractual relationship, that sure, the PBM, if the drugs go down, they can save some money, and they agree to give us all a lower rate because of that, because they're taking that risk, not us, we're happy to sign on to a spread pricing agreement because we have certainty and we can kind of, at least they believe, narrow that level down to make it cheaper for all of our members. And so I would love to just put spread pricing back in, but I at least think it's important to have with the consent of the health benefit plan, because allowing this in many cases keeps that relationship, because people want to use PBMs because they believe it helps them lower the price, whether or not you believe that. Second, on page 5, I tried to delete the entire Romanet 9 a couple times now. And we had this long conversation yesterday on a split amendment. And so what I'm attempting to do, I've heard your concerns, is only delete the last sentence on that. So it'll still say reimburse a pharmacy for services, not an amount less. But it's really important when you look at pages 15 or lines 15 through 18, the language says the reimbursement amount paid to the pharmacy shall be equal to the amount paid to the PBM owned or affiliated pharmacy. So when you do an appeal, and in my mind, I just read this and it's a really sneaky way around a contractual obligation to find out exactly what that PBM is giving their affiliate that drug at, right? That's still a contractual relationship between the PBM and their affiliate. You know, where I work has a 5-tier plan on benefits. If you want to use, I work at a hospital, and if you want to use a doctor in that hospital, it's cheaper, right, than going to a doctor at the competition or in a different city or on the Front Range. And so these relationships, I think, are important, right? That's how you bring costs down, because you buy at a certain amount and you agree that it's just basic economics, right? We'll all agree to contract with you if you agree to get the price down and it benefits everybody. And so if you want to leave that kind of price fixing on the overall, what we call pharmacy services, and that is defined on page, I think, page 9 at the top. So pharmacy services in general is a combination of all products, goods, and services. That's fine. I think you can batch that at a large enough level if you look through the bill on ensuring if there is an appeal, the Department of Insurance can come and say, hey, here's generally the rate, here's generally the rate. What bothers me on this reimbursement amount paid shall be equal to, when you appeal, you basically get to find out what that exact rate is, and I would just tell you that's probably none of your business, right? That's a different contractual obligation. So those two things really concern me that are still in the bill. Obviously, I have lots of concerns about the bill, and I look forward to coming back next year and talking to you more about PBMs, is what it looks like. But for this time, if you would hopefully agree with me that we can sideboard that definition on page 4 and delete that language on page 5, I would ask for your considerable aye vote on the amendment.
Representative Banks for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We defeated this same attempt yesterday to take this language out, and I would encourage the body to do so again. That in essence, it defeats the purpose of the bill, because what we're trying to do is rein in the abusive practices that deter that competition. Because giving preference to a pharmacy that is owned by the PBM itself doesn't do anything in the fair market. In fact, it does the opposite. And we heard some language yesterday that said that. If there's language we need to keep to maintain the intent of this bill, it's this language. We've got to make the reimbursements, if they're going to do that, if they're going to say, I'm going to send you to a pharmacy that I own myself, then the reimbursement shouldn't be higher than one that's down the street. That's not right practice. That's not capitalism at its best. So we should resist that notion. Again, these abusive practices and the effect that they're having on our pharmacies and the manipulation that's taking place is something that we need to stop. It's not going to make prices go up. It's not going to do anything but help our rural pharmacies stay in competition with these chains that are owned by the PBMs itself. So on and against this amendment and urge a no vote. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Berger for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've been really researching and looking at this amendment plus this bill, but I guess this amendment does help the bill for the people in my area that I'm talking for right now and myself, but it still doesn't make the bill, I don't think, even better. We have a hard time where I'm from negotiating these prices within our own companies and schools, and it's just going to be really hard to keep our costs down, because if we're price fixing or especially insurance or pharmacy benefits, prescription benefits, they're very hard to negotiate when you go out of state, because these out of state groups come when you negotiate, when they said there's so many restrictions in Wyoming where we're at, that it's really hard to negotiate these prices. And so you end up paying really high prices. And in my area, they're talking about how high our insurance is going to go up. We don't have the advantage in our area to be able to have insurance companies within the state to negotiate, because there's very few. And our insurance companies, a lot from our area, we negotiate out of state. And this is just going to make it really hard for us in Evanston. So I would say yes on this amendment, but I still am not for this bill. Thank you.
Representative Penn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I would have to respectfully disagree with the good representative in the camel coat. What the current language in this bill says is that a PBM shall not conduct spread pricing. So we've had a lot of terms here. So again, spread pricing basically is when the PBM collects a higher amount than what has been reimbursed. So overall, it does increase the costs to the consumer because the health plan is being charged more. This language in the bill is truly a consumer protection. Spread pricing incentivizes the PBM to drive costs up because then they get to pocket the difference. Please resist this amendment and support the bill. Thank you.
Representative Strzok for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, what we're talking about here is the transparency. And again, I want you all to remember what this amendment is taking away everything we've been working on, and it will really hurt this bill. And again, I want you to remember what we're going to lose. We're going to lose pharmacies, big and small ones, it doesn't matter. And you guys will be, everyone will just be having to call to get their drugs and anything for their children. We need to really remember that and remember what small businesses and the big ones. But again, I am against this amendment and for the bill. Thank you.
Representative Western for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, I certainly appreciate the good chairman from the capital city and his logic. I think it makes sense, but I think when you really kind of think through this in practice, the implications are concerning, and this is why. The way the spread pricing is defined in the bill, if I'm a PBM and I can charge a different price than what I pay to the insurance company, what I bill them for, you know, that makes sense, right? Every business has to make money. That's how they stay in business. But when you think about it, if it's the PBM, if it is a pharmacy-owned PBM and the PBM, you're kind of in a situation where you're stacking the deck in your own favor. You get to be the dealer, you get to deal with the cards. And especially if it's a situation where those health insurance plans don't have a lot of alternatives to turn to, where it's like, I'm the only show in town, I'm the PBM and I own the pharmacy. I think that creates a situation where these insurance companies say, well, technically this says we have to consent to it, but because it's a foregone conclusion, we have no choice but to accept it because they're kind of the only show in town. So that's the dynamic that I worry about, and that's why I would encourage a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Stivar for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment. I was on labor health for 4 years and listened to this. I've traveled the state. I've stopped and talked to these independent pharmacies. We need to take care of the mom and pop pharmacies, so vote no on this amendment.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Penn for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I neglected my first time to draw attention to the second part of this amendment, what it is taking out. And that is, it's taking out the ability to audit the process. So on page 5, line 15, what is currently in the bill and what would be taken out by this amendment says the reimbursement amount paid to the pharmacy shall be equal to the reimbursement amount paid to the pharmacy, PBM-owned pharmacy. So we need this language in the bill still to allow the audit process to take place and continue with the transparency and continue to protect our consumers and our pharmacies and therefore our community. So please resist this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Banks for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I want to put to rest some of this confusion that this is going to mess with contracts. Right now, does your PBM negotiate the best contract for you? We don't know. We don't know because there's no transparency in this industry and there's no transparency with this group. We don't know if they're negotiating the best contract for you. This will make it possible for us to see if you're getting the best contract you can get. This opens up that ability to have that transparency, which is important. And if we think that a monopoly of this is going to negotiate a better price for you, I might respectfully suggest a reconsideration because they're going to do what's best for themselves. And the idea that I heard earlier that this is going to increase cost if we don't include this amendment, this amendment and this bill and this language that it's trying to take out doesn't touch dispensing fees, which is one of the things we're being told that's going to increase prices. It doesn't touch dispensing fees, and you still have the ability to have those specialty drugs through mail order. Those are the biggest arguments we have that this is going to increase costs. I would submit to you it's just not accurate. So resist this amendment and vote aye on the bill. Thank you.
Chairman Zwanitzer, bring us home.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought my home was Wyoming where we enjoyed free market capitalism, but it's not what I'm hearing today on the floor after 20 years of doing this. So maybe let me just correct some fundamental misunderstandings about Wyoming and our insurance market. We are the second or third highest insurance market in the country. Why? Because nobody wants to take us on, quite honestly, right? We're older, we have poorer health incomes, we're more rural, higher rates of tobacco use, of suicide, of drinking, everything that health plans and insurance plans, don't want to cover except with higher costs. So let's start there. I need you to understand that yes, there's 3 PBMs in the marketplace, but there's no requirement for them to take health plans on, right? We can seem to think that when I keep hearing these conversations that it's required. PBMs don't necessarily want to even interact with us, right? They don't necessarily make money. They're not banging down our door saying, hey, let's represent you. We really want you. We, as health plans in the state of Wyoming, are desperate to find care at the cheapest price we can. We are trying to go to them in many cases for many of our plans, right? I think you've all heard from your cities, your counties, your local government, your health insurance pools, everyone in the private market, because we've exempted all the federal covered programs, Medicaid, Medicare, workers' comp. It's about half the industry on these prescription drugs. What's left is all of the private insurance market. And so I'd submit to you, if we just outlaw spread pricing in general, some of the PBMs may say, hey, we don't want to take you on, right? That's the fear, is can we push this to the point where we're going to somehow hold international corporations hostage by the laws we put in place in Wyoming? No, we're not. My fear is we're going to cause an issue that says a PBM says, we're not going to work with you. Your drug costs can go up higher. So that's the fear. We already have audits and statute in this PBM thing. We're adding new language already to be able to do contest stations. I mean, there's so much amazing things if you want to support your pharmacies in here already. I think we keep saying that. I do want to disavow the notion that this bill solely helps your rural independent pharmacies. There's a whole bunch of information out there. It helps all pharmacies, right? From your largest to your smallest. And I know we all want to help our small rural independent ones. Sure, a rising tide lifts all boats, but this is not the thing to go back and say, hey, independent pharmacy, we passed this bill and you're getting this big windfall. This is still going to manufacturers, larger pharmacies, and it's affecting the bottom line of all your health plans. So again, back on my amendment, the two things, I think you don't want spread pricing, your health benefit plan can say no, right? But if they say, hey, part of our contractual agreement is to keep these costs down to benefit all of our payers, we'll agree to it if you promise to say this is the maximum that you will charge us for all of these drugs. That's certainty in the marketplace. The second part is you want to reimburse similar services, that's fine. But when you say it has to be equal to, how would you ever know what the equal to price is unless you get to go into someone else's contract and find exactly what they're paying on that med to their affiliated pharmacy? I would just hold to you that is a contractual relationship outside of the scope of any of us or anyone's business besides that individual contract. So again, I'm not trying to support PBMs here. I'm trying to support free market. I'm trying to support your health insurance plans, trying to support your county, your local governments, all of your entities, that prices will go up. And yeah, we saved probably 75%, but it's still going to take a hit of 8 to 10 million to the private insurance market passing this bill. We think, we don't totally know. I'm just trying to give as much certainty as I can. So again, ask for you in favor of the amendments.
Okay, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 151 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 151 has failed. Senate File 151 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellement. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron, excused. Chadwick. Chestick. Clauston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. I'm sorry, Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers. Stith. Yin? Are there any changes? Conrad, no to aye. Summers, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 40 aye, 21 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 151, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 151 has passed the House. We're at that order of do we have any messages of the Senate? Let's do messages from the Senate for a minute.
Message 458. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 146, state-funded capital construction. Ayes 18, noes 13. Message 459. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 174, Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board. Ayes 20, noes 11. Message number 10. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Wyoming Statute 28-12-102, the Senate voted on the confirmation of the governor's appointments and confirmed all nominees but one, by the votes indicated. Ayes 27-4. 27 ayes, no 4. 30, noes 0. Ayes 7, noes 24. Message number 11, override governor's veto. Mr. Speaker, the Senate voted by a 2/3 vote of the membership to override the governor's vetoes to House Bill 1, House Enrolled Act number 37, as follows. Motion 1, override vetoed, language of footnote 3. Motion 2, override vetoed, language of footnote 2. Motion 3, override vetoed, language of footnote 11. Motion 4, override vetoed, language of footnote 14. Motion 5, override vetoed, language of footnote 5. Motion 6, override vetoed, language of section 328C. Message 460. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 127, Wyoming Stable Token Act. Ayes 20, noes 9, excused 2. Message 461. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 94, Federal Indian Child Welfare Act codification. Ayes 22, noes 7, excused 2. Message 462. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 153, Election Security. Ayes 27, noes 3, excused 1. Message 463. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 164, Public Improvement Contract Requirements Amendments. Ayes 29, excused 2. Message 464. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 147, Government Contracts, Labor Organization. Ayes 28, noes 2, excused 1. Message 465. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 4, Medicaid 12-month postpartum coverage. Ayes 16, noes 14, excused 1. Message 466. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 76, Licensing Board Amendments. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 29, noes 1, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 467. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 171, State Land Leases. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 28, noes 1, excused 1, conflict 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message number 468. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 208, School Foundation Program Reserve Account Investments. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 26, noes 4, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 469. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 222, Colorado River Advisory Committee. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the votes indicated. Ayes 29, noes 1, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 470. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 52, Revisers Bill. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 30, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 471. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 152, Life is a Human Right Act. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 25, noes 5, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Chief, I'm going to stand at ease for just a second. We're at that order of business of consideration of joint conference committee reports. The first report for our consideration is Joint Conference Committee number 1 on House Bill 144, Chairman Strzok. Chairman Strzok, just remember to move that Joint Conference Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to move Joint Conference Committee Report, House Bill 144,
That's good.
and ask for your favorable vote.
Go ahead, Representative Strzok, if you have anything you want to.
Well, I would just like to thank you all, and I want to tell you we've all worked really hard to make this very kind to all of the districts. And I'm just would ask that just for a favorable eye on it. And we're really excited to get to work on our end of it in Douglas. So I really do feel like we addressed everybody's concerns. I had 2 very wonderful people here visiting with everybody, and then we went to conference, and as far as I can tell, we've addressed everyone's concerns. So thank you.
We are voting on Joint Conference Committee Report number 1 On House Bill 144, a majority of the elected members is required to adopt the report. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron, excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Western, can you repeat? Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 54 aye, 7 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have adopted Joint Conference Committee Report Number 1 on House Bill 144. The next Joint Conference Committee for our consideration is Joint Conference 2 on House Bill 14, Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Joint Conference Committee report from Joint Conference Number 2 on House Bill 14 and do ask for your favorable consideration. This is the civil filing fee adjustment where we're ratcheting up the civil filing fee. And the issue that is central to this conference report is basically our department that oversees family and services. When it has a filing fee for a child support action, it incurs a fee, and obviously it has to have the money in its budget for the fee. So when we increase the civil filing fees, we impact their ability to file the cases that they traditionally do because they don't have in their budget accounted for that increase. So what we decided to do in this joint conference report is just apply a general fund appropriation for what would be an estimation based on the amount that they would incur with the rise in the civil fees, and it's pretty minimal. It's $47,800. So that's the first thing this conference report does. And then the second thing this amendment does is it authorizes the federal funds expenditure of $79,200. So for every case they file, I think it's 66% of the filing fees reimbursed to them from the federal government. So we need to both authorize the federal funds and appropriate the general funds. I'll take any questions. Otherwise, I'd ask for your favorable consideration. I vote.
We are voting on Joint Conference Committee Report Number 1 to House Bill 14, a majority of elected, no. Just a minute. Yeah, that's right. We are voting on Joint Conference Committee number 2 on House Bill 14. A majority of the elected members is required to adopt the report. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron, excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storr? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanzer Dan? Zwanzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Harshman? Excused to aye. Further changes? Are there any Knapp? Aye to no. Heiner, can you repeat? Aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 42 aye, 19 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to adopt Joint Conference Committee Report number 2 on House Bill 14. I'm gonna do this one first. Chairman Newsom, are you gonna be ready to do the revisers? Okay. We're at that order of business of request to concur with Senate amendments to House bills. The first message for our consideration is message number 470 on House Bill 52, Chairman Newsom.
Mr. Speaker, I move message number 470 for House Bill 52 and suggest that we concur. It seems that the changes made in the by the body across the hall were acceptable to the bringer of the bill. So an aye vote is in order. Thank you.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 52. A majority of the elected members is required. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Alaman, Allred, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Berger, Brown, Burkhart, Byron excused, Chadwick, Chestick, Clauston, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez-Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanzer Dan, Zwanzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 60 aye, 2 excused.
Next message for our, let's see, no, I gotta say my little speech there. By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 52. The next message for our consideration is message number 469, Chairman Eklund on House Bill 222.
Mr. Speaker, I move message 469 to House Bill 222. Folks, this is the Colorado River Advisory Committee, and what the bill is doing is codifying what we're doing on that advisory force. There, if you look at the concurrence report, there's quite a bit here, but all of it was agreed on and needed, I believe, in order to codify that act. So I would ask for I would ask for an aye vote for concurrence.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 222. A majority of elected members is required. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Element, Allred, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Berger, Brown, Burkhart, Byron excused, Chadwick, Chestick, Clauston, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd,
Excused.
Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley,
Excused.
Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western.
Excused.
Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwaniter Dan. Zwaniter Dave. Speaker Summers.
Aye.
Larson Lloyd, excused to aye. Oakley, excused to aye. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 60 aye, 2 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 222. The next message for our consideration, if the chairman is ready, would be message number 466 on House Bill 76. Chairman Newsom, are you ready for that one or not?
Speaker, I move message number 466 to House Bill 76. And there are a few technical corrections that need to be made. I would defer to my friend from the capital city to explain that.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Asking for a no vote. As you'll see on the bill, our good friends down the hall cut out 96% of what I brought. But in their cutting and cutting, they actually put some stuff back in, and somehow in the chain of events, that amendment that they put on in their standing committee didn't make it into the actual standing committee amendment. And so even though it was discussed all the way through, apparently nobody actually bothered to read the language, the wording, because words matter. So we do need to go back in conference to help correct the problem, to bring in a section that was inadvertently left out, the committee voted on, and they said they knew what they were voting on, but apparently it wasn't in the language. So your no vote would be appreciated on behalf of your Board of Veterinary Medicine.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 76. The majority of the elected members is required. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron, excused. Chadwick. Chestick. Klauston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Warnock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers.
No.
Are there any changes? Chadwick, aye to no. Harshman, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 4 aye, 56 no, 2 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to not concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 76. Conferees will be Zwanitzer Dan, Chair, Storr, Conrad. The next message for our consideration is message number 471 on House Bill 152. Are you ready for that one or not? Okay. We'll set that aside. Chairman Newsom, are you ready for 467? Let me get that one geared up then. Next message for our consideration is message number 467 on House Bill 171. Chairman Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move message number 467 on House Bill 171. And after a telephone conference between the bringer of the bill, who is about to have a baby, and the good representative from House District 39, they're asking for concurrence. So if you would vote yes on this particular concurrence request.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill
Mr.
170.
Speaker.
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I would urge an aye vote on concurrence. I think the House position was actually really, really good, and there was a lot of good work that we put into that bill. However, I think it is appropriate to vote on concurrence.
Okay, we are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 171. A majority of the elected members is required. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Ellerman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron, excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storr? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western, excused. Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
Aye.
Alamand, aye to no. Singh, aye to no. Strock, aye to no. Stivar, can you repeat? I'm sorry. Ottman, no to aye. Are there any changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 40 aye, 20 no, 2 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 171. The next motion, or next message for our consideration is message number 468 on House Chairman, did you want to do that one? Okay, message number 468 on House Bill 208, Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd move message 468 on House Bill 208 and urge your no vote on concurrence. Totally did not help the bill or our, anyway, so please vote no. We need to talk with our friends down the hall. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 208. A majority of the elected members is required. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron excused. Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western excused. Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? No. Are there any changes? Sherwood? Aye to no. Provenza? Aye to no. Banks? Banks, no to aye. Ward? No. No to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 23 aye, 37 no, 2 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to not concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 208. Conferees will be Harshman, Chair, Lawley, Nicholas. Okay, we don't need that one. So, do we have a few enrolled acts to sign? We're at that order of business of signing of enrolled acts. The first enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act number 76. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act number 76, being original Senate File 131. An act relating to elections, prohibiting a person from distributing unsolicited absentee ballot request forms to any qualified elector, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 76, being original Senate File number 131. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act number 77. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act number 77 being original Senate File 83, an act relating to K through 12 school facility leasing, modifying leasing agreements, modifying the duties of the state construction department as specified, modifying use of the school district's facilities by charter schools as specified, requiring approval for major maintenance expenditures on leased facilities, requiring separate accounting, requiring reporting, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 77, being original Senate File number 83. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act number 78. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act number 78, being original Senate File 80, an act relating to public health and safety, establishing visitation rights and limitations for specified healthcare facilities, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 78, being original Senate File number 80. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act number 79. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act number 79, being original Senate File 61, an act relating to per diem rates, increasing the statutory per diem rate for specified legislative activities, increasing per diem rates that are based upon the legislative rate, providing for adjustment of the per diem rate, providing applicability, providing appropriations, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 79, being original Senate File number 61. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 80. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act number 80, being original House Bill 89, an act relating to investment of state funds, authorizing specified state permanent fund reserve accounts to maintain larger balances for the benefit of state investment strategies, providing for that balances in specified reserve accounts are intended to be inviolate, removing the encumbrances on specified reserve accounts, defining legislative intent for future appropriations and budget requests, providing legislative findings, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 80, being original House Bill number 89. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 81. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act number 81, being original House Bill 74, an act relating to state lands, creating a Wyoming Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund account, providing funding for the trust account, providing for appropriation, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 81, being original House Bill number 74. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 82. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act number 82, being original House Bill 17, an act relating to state lands, providing for leasees of state lands to graze livestock they do not own, but for which they retain management responsibility on leased lands without obtaining permission from the Director of the Office of State Lands and Investments, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 82, being original House Bill number 17. I have so signed. Chief, does that clear the deck? Maybe? We'll stand at ease for a couple of minutes. Yeah, we'll just go on. Okay, Chief, does that clear the deck? Are we still waiting? Okay. Chief, does that clear the deck? The deck is kind of messy, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, but I think it might could be cleaned now, so, yeah, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, the second day of March, 2023.
Committee announcements. Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your conference committee for House Bill 93 and Senate File 96 will meet in the morning at 8 o'clock down in either, I think it'll be in 113. Then your members of this next interim select committee on capital finance will meet tomorrow at 3 p.m. in the Capital Extension E5 to select chairman, vice chairman, and consider topics and dates.
Anybody else? Chairman Brown.
Mr. Speaker, I hope this is the last time I have to make this announcement, but we plan on meeting for the select school facilities tomorrow upon noon recess to do the exact same information that the Vice Chair of Appropriations just mentioned.
All right, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Appropriation will meet at noon on recess to go over interim topics with our friends down the hall.
Anybody else? You've heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The House is adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, March 2nd, 2023.